Well, good morning. Welcome to the Bayfield Area Trails Midwinter Community Meeting. And with the wind blowing out there this morning, it's probably not such a bad place to be with your cup of coffee or your cup of tea. And hopefully the wind will die down and we'll be able to get outside out onto a trail somewhere later today. My name's Kate Kitchell, and I'm the chair of the Bayfield Area Trails Committee. And I want to start by saying a big thank you to our committee for helping to pull this together and being so supportive as we've grown as a little itty bitty organization, and we continue to evolve thanks to the support from the committee, from the sponsors, and from all of you who are devoted volunteers and trails enthusiasts. This is a super duper thank you to Tony Jeanette, our technical expert, communications, artistic designer extraordinaire. And Tony has, as many people know, has many talents, and those are on display today with our PowerPoint presentation that we will be sharing with you. So thank you so much, Tony, for pulling this together and supporting all of our communications efforts. Let's jump on into a review of the agenda so folks know what they can expect from the meeting today. So we'll first start with just a little bit of background on Bayfield Area Trails. This will be a bit of a repeat for some folks, but it's always helpful just to sort of think about where we started and where we came from and kind of where we hope to go. And then Erica Lang from Landmark Conservancy will provide a little bit of an update on the Brownstone Trail. And then we'll drill into really the meat of the presentation, which is our 2022 priorities. We're going to focus really on trail projects and trails planning, because that's really the meat of what we do. But then, of course, we can't get those things done without funding and volunteers and some additional help. So Genevieve Johnson will speak briefly about our priority funding needs for 2022. And then we've formulated a couple subcommittees. So we'll hear from those subcommittees briefly and identify how you all who may be interested in participating can kind of plug into those subcommittees. And then we'll wrap up with just the Q&A and any discussion. So, people's ideas and thoughts are welcome at any time. That's the nature of Bayfield Area Trails, and we welcome all kinds of perspectives. So that's our plan. And then I'll just sort of jump into providing a little bit of background about our vision, our mission, and our organization. So our vision of Bayfield Area Trails, which was sort of initially born in 2019, is for a trails network connecting the Bayfield area communities. And the idea is to build upon the existing trails that we already have, many of which are, outstanding trails unto themselves. So starting sort of in the southwestern corner of our area, of course, we have the Mount Ashway trails, then the Hatchery Trail, the Brownstone Trail, the Big Ravine trails, and then up to the north, Frog Bay, north of the Red Cliffs, the community of Red Cliff. So our vision is really to build upon that network and identify linkage opportunities to connect those existing trails, whether that's connecting the Big Ravine up to the top of Bayfield Hill, or it's connecting the Brownstone Trail to the Salmo Trail and ultimately up to Ashway Bay. That's where we're kind of focusing our development. And of course, those of you who know the territory, I'm sure, have ideas on where those networking expansion opportunities may be. And our mission as Bayfield Area Trails is to create a well-managed multiple-use trails network connecting our communities. And when I speak to the idea of multiple use, that really doesn't mean the same use on every trail. It's just recognizing that there's all kinds of trails out there, whether that's hiking or skiing or biking. And there's a place for every kind of use in the world of trails. So our philosophy with Bayfield Area Trails is really to leverage and collaborate with whoever has enthusiasm about trails, whatever type of trail that may be. So that's our vision. It's a pretty big vision, but hey, why not think big and take it one step at a time? So when that initial vision was sort of launched, we convened the core members of the committee who are listed here. We now have 8 members representing the municipalities from the city, the 2 towns, Bayfield County, and a couple of nonprofit organizations that specifically have land management and recreation orientation, those being Landmark and Ashwa Bay. And of course, Red Cliff is a key partner as well. So this committee was established and basically launched in 2020 with the signing of a memorandum of understanding. And I'm very excited to acknowledge our most recent member, the town of Bell, and Peter Roth is representing both the town of Bell and the Cornucopia Trails Committee, which you'll hear a little bit about for later on. So then we've also recently established a couple subcommittees to try to expand and solidify our capacity as an organization. First, a small but mighty communications subcommittee, which you've seen visible through our website and our Facebook page, as well as the signage on the trails. And then our more recent trail subcommittee with 3 folks on it. And that's one of the places where we're hoping that we'll have a couple folks who want to raise their hand and jump in with a couple feet. So there is our committee, and we're up and rolling, let's put it that way. So moving on, hopefully folks had an opportunity to click on the video link and see that great little video that celebrated our 2021 accomplishments. And if you haven't seen it yet, you can check it out on the website or link on the Facebook page. But we wanted to primarily focus this presentation looking forward. So we synthesized those key accomplishments through that video. Nonetheless, I can't help but give a shout out to the many, many volunteers who made 21 a successful year. We had some fun and we got some stuff done. And you can see many volunteer hours. Those of you who have been volunteers, I can't thank you enough for all the enthusiasm and support. And when you add up all of that time, it's a pretty valuable asset that we have. And of course, I can't help but also acknowledge Will Crift in the upper right-hand corner with a big smile on his face. Will has been a stalwart leader through our activities. Those of you who have worked on the school trail or Hemlock Heights or Brownstone or Pine Bluff all know that Will brings huge expertise as a professional trail builder. He's taught us all a huge amount about trail building and maintenance, and always had the muscle to carry a project forward, even when the going gets tough. So special thanks and recognition to Will. And in addition to our volunteer contributions, we've been supported by a wide range of funders. And I want to just express, again, huge appreciation for their support all across the community and all across the state. And we hope to continue to build upon those successes that were both in 21. We had an equally successful year in 2020, and hopefully that set a foundation for years to come. So let's talk about the Brownstone Trail. At this point, I will pass the baton on to Erica Lang.
Thanks, Kate, for asking me to share an update about the Brownstone Trail. I'm Erica. I'm the conservation manager here at Landmark Conservancy, still based out of the Bayfield office, and a lot of our colleagues are in the Menominee office. As we here at Landmark and all of you recognize that are at this meeting today, we know the Brownstone Trail is a really beloved community trail. It's a major artery, part of the Bayfield Trails, Bayfield Area Trails Network, and it serves as a really important connector from Mount Ashwa Bay and the fish hatchery, which Kate will talk a little bit more about in a bit, and to the city of Bayfield and really beyond. And as a conservation organization, Landmark, as well as many of you, also really value the lakeshore where the trail travels for its natural resources, that beautiful wildlife habitat, the scenic views, the native vegetation, the migratory birds in the spring and the fall. So for us, it's even more than just about the trail. So it's for all those reasons that we as a community continue to put time and resources into this trail. As we've already shared with all of you, we've been busy over the last year, and I know those accomplishments and everything you've already viewed. But with that, we wanted to share just a few highlights. So the first thing happens to be with the Blue Wing Bay area. We just really wanted to remind folks that came out, I think, last year, maybe a year and a half ago, where that legal trail actually is. There were quite a few people using the old railroad grade, which is actually private property, and we don't have a legal trail through those 4 or 5 parcels. So really trying to encourage folks to stay on the legal trail in this section and off that privately owned railroad grade. We are planning additional future signage and also a memorial bench for Peg Dollinger, Rex's wife, will be put there too. And I think that will also help guide folks to the right direction, if you will. Landmark continues to look at additional signage along the trail as needed, replacing some of those super old signs that you all see out there, and just trying to get everything to look a little nicer and tidier out on the trail. And then in the slump area, we've been really, we've maybe been a little quiet over the last few months, but we are in the final negotiations with the Mackey family, with Mark and Dan Mackey, to acquire that property. It is coming along very nicely. They are in the final phases of reviewing the purchase agreement. So we're really excited. They've been very willing to sell to us, very willing to work with us. So it's been great. It's just has taken a little bit of time as they think about their business move and how that's all going to work for them. Once that we have the go-ahead for that, we will be doing a lot of community fundraising. We will not be able to acquire this property without all of you and people beyond the folks that are on this call. And then also moving into the design for restoration of that slope face, the trail where that will go up on top, and then also as a community space, what that property is going to look like. Well, during all of that, we'll be doing ongoing community outreach, fundraising again via grants if we can get them, and then also community members and donors in the community, and then moving on to the restoration of that property. And then the other thing I want to mention, or I want to plug in, as we shared a few months ago with all of you, Northland College began a shoreline inventory study along the Brownstone Trail. So looking at the shoreline, but also the trail that happens to sit on the shoreline. The purpose of the study is really to learn more about other areas of erosion, pinch points, slumps. We and other partners, it became very clear in a community meeting of 2020 that we had, we really want to take a long view, more holistic approach towards shoreline and trail stability, long-term sustainability of that. So as we fix the trail at the current slump, we want to make sure the trail supports people getting to that spot. And so what is happening between the slump area and the beginning of the trail, for instance? Are there other areas that we are all going to need to address as a community? And we're finding out that that answer is yes. And so Tom Fitz, a geology professor at Northland College, he led the study with some students. He began collecting data, making observations last fall. And we are now at the time where we all want to invite all of you as we host a virtual presentation of the shoreline inventory study results next Wednesday at 4 p.m. So you can find a link on Landmark's website. We have capacity for more than 100 folks. I think we have 130 signed up right now for the presentation. So we really encourage you to be there. We'll give a very brief update about the slump project too, but really it'll be focusing on what we know in the future of the trail holistically as a whole. But that's all I had. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Erica. So as you can see, this really is a team effort. Our vision is to leverage all the partnerships to support this trails network in terms of maintaining it, but also ultimately expanding it. And Landmark has been a key partner, as folks know, over the years. So as we've started to organize ourselves as a committee, we've organized ourselves around sort of 4 categories. Those include planning trails and securing access, So that is the idea of identifying where these connectors might be, researching topography and land ownership, and working with willing landowners to establish trail access. Then the sort of the next step in that process, of course, is maintaining and building trails. And that's really the fun part, where you can really be gratified to see the results of a day's work. So, and of course, that's where a lot of our volunteer effort has been. We also recognize that it's important to build and sustain organizational capacity. And I'm sure many of you have been involved with, various nonprofit organizations and community organizations. And it is a challenge to figure out how to sustain the kind of enthusiasm that we've seen with Bayfield area trails. So, we're putting some effort into setting up processes and procedures and volunteer capacity to try to sustain what we've started. And then central to all of this, of course, is communicating. That's communicating with the community, that's keeping people informed about our efforts, but even more importantly, providing good quality information about trails, where to go, any concerns about safety, what kind of experience you can expect out on the trails. So communication is a link between all of these different aspects of the Bayfield area trails activities. So I'd like to drill down into the fun part, maintaining and building trails. And that's kind of the core of what we'll talk about today. We'll be talking specifically about our 2022 projects. Of course, many of these will be engaging volunteers as we have in the past, because that's been a very successful model in getting things done and building ownership in the trails. And in a couple cases, projects will be led by a professional contractor, as we've done over the last couple of years with hiring Will Crift to design and lead the construction crews. So that's sort of the approach that we will be taking. The projects that we'll be talking about are the ones that are definitely on the docket. A couple of others actually may emerge through the springtime that would be added to our schedule, but these still create a pretty full schedule of work. So as we go through this presentation, you'll see that different projects are kind of under the sponsorship of different partners. And so I'll talk first about the Big Ravine. A good portion of the Big Ravine just north of the city is under city ownership and under the guidance of the City Parks and Recreation Committee. And in the last couple of years, the connectors that have been developed have really opened up a lot of hiking, snowshoeing, and just outdoor experience opportunities. So in the next year, we'll really be focusing on maintenance kinds of activities, both in terms of vegetation management, but also in terms of stabilizing and maintaining the trails we have in place. So we'll start the season early in April/May with a couple vegetation management projects. The first is the Battle of the Forget-Me-Nots. And several folks have been involved with this effort. We all sort of find forget-me-nots pretty in the right place, but they are very invasive and have the potential to really alter the ecosystem in the Big Ravine. So we got to get to them early and pull those little puppies out of the ground. So we'll be reaching out and asking for folks to participate in that. Then we'll do a follow-up planting at the beginning of the Gil Larson Trail, keeping the Iron Bridge viewshed open and working on sort of restoring desirable native species there. Many folks participated in the planting last year. We had about a 70% survival rate of the plantings that we put in there. So we will follow up in May with some additional plantings of those native species to kind of keep that restoration momentum. Then we will in May do some follow-up work, working with Will Crift and his expertise on the school trail. In particular, there's a lower section that needs some stabilization where some drainage off of the hill is kind of impacting the trail at the base. So we'll be working on that. And folks may be aware that quite a bit of that hillside adjacent to the school has had had sort of a rough history, so it needs some work in terms of restoration. So we'll be planting native species along that slope, both to stabilize it as well as to have another generation of vegetation to grow up as the big old trees sadly become decadent and leave us. So we'll be doing that stabilization and planting in May. Then on the Gil Larson Trail, we'll be focusing on rebuilding the stone steps kind of near the platform by the waterfall. Folks who are familiar with that probably know those steps can be a little bit sketchy for folks, unless you're a mountain goat. So we're going to do some work on those steps, again, working with Will Crift. And there's some sections of boardwalk that we'd like to replace, both in terms of maintenance and for safety purposes. And then the last project that we'll work on in July is on the West Rim Trail. Those folks who are familiar with the West Rim, that is historically been an incredibly popular trail. It was really originally kind of recognized as the Big Ravine Trail. And it's gotten a lot of use and wear and tear, which is a wonderful sign that people love this trail. But there are a couple places where rocks and roots have really become exposed, and the trail tread is a little bit rough and has some tripping hazards. So we'll do some work in there to remove those rocks, recontour the tread, maybe remove some of those roots. So that's when we'll pull out our rogue hose and our shovels and our axes and fix up that tread so it's a little more user-friendly. So from the Big Ravine in the city, we move to the Big Ravine in the town. Erica.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. So lots going on in the Big Ravine, a lot of trail work. And then, of course, Landmark continues to look at land protection because that falls within our mission. So this property, this 10-acre property in the headwaters has long been on, I think, quite a few of community members' minds, and definitely even Bayfield Regional Conservancy's mind back in the day. And just the timing wasn't quite right. The price wasn't quite right. The landowner wasn't quite ready. So we've continued to noodle away at it a little bit. And then Kate kind of really started the ball rolling a couple of years ago to say, hey, maybe now is a good time. So this is an acquisition. We're hopeful this will become an acquisition of 10 acres in the headwaters of the Big Ravine. Many folks are probably familiar with this property. It has a small wetland and then also has a drainage that then obviously drains into and becomes the larger part of the Big Ravine. It's really complementary to the work that's already been done in the Big Ravine system. Almost 200 acres of the Big Ravine are already protected. 75 acres of those are the town of Bayfield, and those are protected with a conservation easement that Landmark Conservancy holds. And then the 120 acres or so is with the city of Bayfield, really protected through their zoning, but they're also thinking about doing a conservation easement to protect it in perpetuity. We have 4 pending grant applications out there for this tiny little parcel. It's taken quite a bit of work. We've received very good review from the DNR, and we should hear this spring about that one. And then the other ones we'll hear from early summer. I'm happy to report that obviously we had to do an appraisal, but that appraisal was funded by the town and private donors. So that can be a heavy lift sometimes to get to that part of the project started, to make sure that the appraised value is going to work for the landowner and everything. And it is part of the whole project process that we have to do. And then we have a purchase agreement with the closing October 1, 2022. And we'll be able to close before that if all the grants come in and we're ready to go. And we do have a signed purchase agreement with the landowner. Future plans, Kate could probably speak about this better than me, but definitely some plans to route the trail through this property so it then connects to the Fire Hill property and then also to the larger Big Ravine system. Some fundraising will be needed for that trail work. And then plans to build the trail boardwalk so folks can really experience that wetland and also the migratory birds that come through, and then some signage too, as interpretive signage, just to connect folks to nature. So super excited about this.
Yay, we are super excited about that. And I want to just take a moment to say a thank you first to Landmark, but also to the town, the town leadership in terms of the chair of the board, as well as all of the board members. They've been super supportive of this project, as well as another project, the Hatchery connection that we'll be talking about. But it shows how things can get done when we work in a spirit of cooperation. And the staff, let us not forget the staff support that is provided both from the town and the city, but all of our organizations. They're the folks behind the scenes that really keep things glued together and follow through. And sometimes accounting is not the easiest thing to do on these kinds of projects. So those are the unsung heroes. Moving on, talking about sort of the diversity of kinds of trails that we as a group are supporting. Many folks, I'm sure, are familiar with the waterfront walk along the harbor in the city. It goes through Memorial Park, some of which is owned, the north end is owned, of course, by the Bayfield Civic League. But if you've ever had to or tried to roll a stroller on this, or even ride a bike or just shuffle along, it's needed some TLC for quite some time. So we're happy to report that thanks to funding from the Wisconsin Coastal Management Program, as well as dozens of private donations from private citizens, the city will be proceeding with resurfacing this walkway this spring, with the goal of having it completed before the 4th of July. And in conjunction with that, of course, that'll include some new signage, as well as some additional memorial benches at the kind of the southern end of the walkway. So another kind of piece in the puzzle. Another set of beloved trails, of course, are the Jerry J. Jolly trails. These are managed under county management, and Jen Bratch is one of our Bayfield Area Trails Committee members. She's at home with a couple little kids running around in the background. So I volunteered to cover this slide so that she didn't have to sort of deal with the complexity of raising two little ones and talking about the project. But we, as Bayfield Area Trails, will round up volunteers to work with the county on, again, doing some maintenance work here on the trails. For folks who know, they're probably most familiar with the purple line, which reflects the more heavily used sections of the trail. Some signage needs to be addressed, but there are some sweet little footpaths in there that have over the years sort of deteriorated. And there's a little trail that goes out to the overlook above Pike's Creek that we wish to improve. And then there's a connecting trail from that overlook back to Pike's Creek, sort of to the west end of the bridge that goes over Pike's Creek. That's the dotted line. And it runs along Pike's Creek. And if you go out there, you can sort of find your way bushwhacking along. But our intention is to, restore that so it's properly and sustainably constructed and a little bit easier to travel. And then there's also a great little connector from the overlook over to the south that connects with the Jolly Long Trail. So while those are relatively small projects, it's something that volunteers can really lend a hand on. And we'll work with Jen on some additional signage to facilitate access to those particular trails and those other connections. The other thing that we hope to be able to address is if folks have traveled that trail down along the creek, there are some sections get pretty wet in the springtime. And then there are also some sections sort of between the overlook and Uppendal's Alley that also get super saturated. So we're hoping both from a hiking as well as a skiing and trail maintenance perspective that we can work with the county to address some of those sort of wet areas. And you can look for that work to happen along about July. And now I'm gonna hand this over to our newest neighbors over to the west, and the show is all yours, Peter.
Hi, the Cornucopia Trails Club is really pleased and excited to be here. We're a new organization. We just are 1 year old this month, actually. And our first project is going to be Pratt's Peak. And if you look at the map to your right, you can see where it is relative to the town of Cornucopia. It's about 3.5 miles away. The club started actually just with an informal conversation about local snowmobile trails around Cornucopia, and then led to think about trails in general, and particularly the very successful Lost Creek Falls Trail, which was created by Bayfield County, and the Siskiwit Falls Preserve, which was created through the generosity of the Swenson family, and then work with Landmark Conservancy and Bayfield County. So we started to think about, well, what more can we do to promote trails locally? And this led to multiple meetings. We made the requisite mission statement, which you can see above. And we selected over time our first project, which is Pratt's Peak, which happens to be located totally on Bayfield County land and in the town of Bayfield in the town of Bell. And we made a proposal and the project was approved in November. So we're ready to proceed. So what is Pratt's Peak? Well, it's a hidden gem. Even if you talk to people around Cornucopia, many people have never heard of it. And the people have heard of it, many don't really know where it is. And for us who've heard of it and tried to find it, it's been very difficult. It took me and others in our group multiple trips to actually locate it. Well, the peak itself is the second highest spot in Bayfield County. And you can see the geodesic marker there in the upper right-hand corner. If you notice there's an arrow there, and above it, it says, above and below, it says Eagle Island, and it's dated 1953. There's two markers up there. And I think in 1953, you probably could see Eagle Island, but now it's surrounded by mature forest. If you want to get a view, there are other spots to gain this view. And in the picture shows Lake Superior, we're 800 feet above the lake. And in the distance there, you can see Eagle Island. And of course, we're looking through many aspen trees. And one of our goals, and with permission of the county, is we're going to remove some of those trees to create some vistas. Another key point there is is Cloud Lake, which is very beautiful, very serene, as waterfowl, et cetera there. So it's going to be a great trail complex. So what's next? Well, we made our plans and we're ready to start work in the late spring and early summer. If you look to the map to the right, it's kind of a rough map. We'll be working on that. The whole trail complex is about almost 6 miles in length. But the good news is that 80% of it is pretty well established, because what we're doing is we're using snowmobile trails, and in this case, snowmobile trail number 1 is a key component of the trail complex. There's also logging trails present, and the only totally new trails are the green and the blue that are pictured in the map there. The blue one is meeting Yellow Trail, and that spot is Pike's Peak or Pratt's Peak itself. And then the star above that is the Vista area, and way on the top at the north is Cloud Lake. So what needs to be done, excuse me, is some work on completing our trail layout. The county is working on determining road access and parking. But we'll need a lot of help with clearing brush. There's some fallen trees, and then removing the obstructing trees to create the vista that we're anticipating. And then eventually maps and signage. I forgot to mention earlier when I was speaking, one big help with the trail creation and our whole project has been the Bayfield Area Trails Group, the Bayfield Area Trails Committee, which we learned about sometime after we restarted the club, and it's been a wonderful resource. And we recently, the town of Bell and the Cornucopia Trails Club recently formally joined them. So I want to give a shout out to this wonderful organization who's organizing this presentation today. So we're going to need volunteers, just like with all the other Bayfield area trails thing. And we're looking forward with working with people on this and making it a reality. And just in an addendum, or what's next, is we're also in preliminary plans working on expanding the trails at the Siskwood River Preserve. That's a 102-acre site managed by Bayfield County. In the area to the right is a flatter area. There's already a small trail, the Meadows Trail, but we'd like to expand that trail and expand it northward. There's an old orchard, which will be fun to be passing through, and then maybe we can even go more to the west along at the top of the ravine that goes to Siskwood River. We hope to make that a summer trail and also a potential cross-country ski trail in the winter. So that's it. We're looking for volunteers, and I hope people are as excited about it as we are, because it's Pratt's Peak is an amazing underutilized area. So.
Totally awesome. I just think that is so cool. And, it's funny, Peter, how you talk about how a lot of people even in Cornucopia weren't aware of where Pratt's Peak is. Well, last year, many folks may remember that Bayfield Area Trails did a community survey, and we're still working from those survey results. But in that community survey, we got some input about potentially developing trails on Pratt's Peak. And many of us said, where the heck is that? And lo and behold, the Cornucopia Trails Club and the town of Bell, voila, stepped forward and said, we know where it is. And we really are excited about expanding the trails opportunities there. So it's been a wonderful, wonderful partnership. And I think people will be very excited to explore it, including me. So let's get out there. So another very exciting project in our portfolio, what we would call the pièce de résistance, is the Hatchery to Ashwa Bay Trail. So in 2019, folks may recall, we held a face-to-face community forum in November of 2019, and we rolled out the maps and talked about, our vision, and I hope we have a chance to do that again someday. But in that process, it surfaced that there was a really cool opportunity to connect from the existing trail behind the Les Voigt State Fish Hatchery on Highway 13. And that's shown there in the gray. Connect that across Pikes Creek and up to the Ashwa Bay Trails. First to the Jolly Long Trail, which skiers in particular are familiar with, and then potentially ultimately up to the Ashwa Bay kind of center there at the chalet, and then up to the top of the mountain. So, but the first big step in that is this Hatchery to Ashwa Bay Trail. And last fall and this spring, a wonderful recon crew mobilized themselves, led by Mick Parent, and out they went, crashing through the brush to find potential crossing of the creek, as well as a route up out of the creek bottom. And so I want to give a shout out to those pioneers for scoping out a couple of different routes. There was one route that was first explored, and then ultimately we landed on the route that is currently on the map here. It is about 4,500 feet of new trail tread construction, as well as about another 0.1 miles beyond the power line to the Jolly Long Trail. So altogether, a little bit over a mile of new trail connection. It's been scoped out. It basically is proposed as non-motorized use. We did scope it out with some special expertise from Steve Vizanko and Scott Nesvold, who are Nordic trail experts or specialists, or whatever the right word is. We scoped it out as a potential cross-country ski trail, but the topography and sort of the gullying along the side slope just makes it just not feasible to construct a trail that has a less steep slope that can accommodate cross-country skiing as a standard use. So it's really a hiking and snowshoeing trail. but there's nothing that says somebody with a desire for a little backcountry experience, they can throw their skins on there and give it a try if they want. But the plan is not to really maintain it for Nordic use. So it will entail both new trail tread construction, and the biggest challenge here is the installation of a footbridge across Pikes Creek. And that was really the driving factor in selecting this particular location. This will be really the biggest leap and challenge that Bayfield Area Trails has taken on so far, but I'm optimistic. I think many of us are optimistic that we'll be able to pull it off. The DNR has been supportive. The town of Bayfield has passed a resolution in support. And I want to give a shout out to them as well as the Town Plan Commission for supporting this project. So our next steps are to finalize the use agreement with DNR, finalize that trail layout in the springtime, and conduct our fundraising and initiate trail construction this year. It's likely due to sort of the lag time with bridges as well as the fundraising challenges. It's likely that we would install the bridge in 2023. But if somehow some magical opportunity for funding arises, we may be able to pull off that bridge installation this fall. So it's a super exciting project, and a lot of stars are aligning to pull it off. So thanks to all who have helped to carry it this far, and for those who are going to help it happen. So transitioning from, the roll up your sleeves and get things done on the ground, as we're getting projects done on the ground, we also need to think about looking forward and planning new trails and new projects to continue to move towards our vision. So that entails identifying potential connections, identifying the routes, researching land ownership, and working with cooperative and willing landowners to develop and establish trails. And we've got some real success stories to look to in this regard. It really actually started with the Erickson family and Fred Erickson supporting the easement along the East Rim Trail in the Big Ravine, and followed by Chuck and Mary Finn's support for the trail on the East Rim as well. And then this summer, I don't know how many folks have checked out the cute little Gracie's Trail, but it connects Betzold Road and County J, thereby basically making a connection, being able to walk from the Big Ravine all the way across and over to Fire Tower Road. So while it's a short little piece of trail, it is a critical linkage, and we want to say a special thanks to Drew Freiliger for his support and willingness to allow this kind of access. So it's that kind of cooperative working relationship that we're looking for to explore possibilities for expanding our trails network. And of course, there's always working on public lands as well with entities like the county and the DNR and the city and town. So, but landowners are key, and we respect private property. So as we think about this, there have been a few brainstorms and ideas that have been put on the table. Those things that we're looking towards in the upcoming planning cycle include, first of all, on the left-hand side, initiating trails planning on the Fire Tower Hill property. This is actually a property that Landmark helped to acquire in cooperation with the county. It's now in county ownership. It's a little over 100 acres, and it can be accessed if you drive to the end of Fire Tower Road. It's really a lovely property with tremendous trails and recreational potential. So Jen Bratch, who is on the phone, will be initiating the process to do some trails planning out there. And we in Bayfield Area Trails want to help support that effort. And this potentially becomes another one of those sort of focal areas for a trails network up at the top of Bayfield Hill. Another area that was identified in 2019 for potential connections is essentially trying to connect the Salmo Trail, which is across from the fish hatchery, a great little trail that goes out to the lake's edge, also administered by the town of Bayfield. Connecting that to the Brownstone Trail, both in that purple area, but also where Tony is circling. He's running his little hand cursor around the end of the Brownstone Trail there on the east side of Waterford. You got it, Tony. So trying to figure out if there's a way to provide clear, well-directed public foot and bike traffic from the end of the Brownstone over to the Salmo. And again, underscoring that this, requires working cooperatively with private landowners and respecting that private property. But it's a critical link, and I'm an optimist. I'm hoping that somehow we can find a way to make that connection. Another connection that's been sort of noodled about is trying to figure out how to connect sort of the Brownstone and the southern part of the city up to the Big Ravine. And there's some chunks of sort of open space in there, as well as some, basic connecting roads within the city. Some of it probably would entail just some signage, and some of it would probably entail new trails and securing easements with private landowners. But the idea here is to be able to connect the Big Ravine to the Brownstone Trail more directly through the outskirts of the city of Bayfield. And then another sort of general area is connecting the Big Ravine to the orchards up on top of Bayfield Hill and ultimately up to Fire Tower Hill. And also potentially from sort of the east side of the Big Ravine to the north. There are a couple sort of existing informal routes in there. So we'd like to kind of explore the possibility of establishing those in a little more long-term manner with some good signage and proper maintenance and cooperative efforts with the private landowners. So these are some of the ideas that we've been chatting about and that have been sort of on the docket for a while. But there are probably others. I mean, those of you who know the territory, who've walked around and thought about, wouldn't it be cool to be able to walk from here to there or ride my bike from here to there? I'm sure you have other ideas. So we'd like to sort of see who's interested out there in being a part of the conversation of, one, identifying these routes a little more specifically and facilitating conversations with landowners. Another area is the Apostle Highlands. It's not really reflected here, but that's where the golf course is up on the top of the hill. There may be some other potential connections from there to the Big Ravine or down into the city. So lots of ideas, but we'd like to try to move those conversations forward a little bit. But we can't get those things done without, one, volunteers, and trying to round up funding both through grants and donations. So with that, I'll hand it over to Genevieve.
Morning, everyone. I'm a longtime trails enthusiast, member of the BATS Trails Committee, and I'm also on the board of Landmark Conservancy. And I was also on the board of Bayfield Regional Conservancy. So I have a long time interest and passion for the trail systems, and I'm so excited about what we've been able to accomplish over the last few years. So of course, many of you probably on the call have been volunteers, and we're so thankful to you for your time and your strong backs and efforts to do that. But we also need money to fund the trails projects that we have planned over the next couple of years. So one that you've already heard about is the Hatchery to Asheville Bay, and this is the most ambitious one that we have planned. And it's, as Kate mentioned, it's possible it could take less than 2 years, but most likely will take at least 2 years. We need about $20,000 to build the trails. About half of that will require a professional trail builder, and the other half will come from grants and private donations. The biggest ticket item is the bridge, which is estimated about $45,000 to buy and install. So many grants will be applied for, but a lot of those do require 50% match. So that comes from in-kind volunteer hours, a fair amount from funding through private and public entities. So we do have partners for this one already, which include the town of Bayfield and XL Energy, which has an easement for their power line through the property. The other project, which you've heard about already, is we're very close to acquiring the funds through grants to purchase the property, but we may have a small amount that we need to raise through private individuals of about $3,500. So we'll keep you posted on that one. It was mentioned that we have some trails planned, primarily boardwalks and viewing platforms through the wildlife and the wetlands. So we plan to launch our fundraising campaign this spring. And so stay tuned for that. And if you are interested now, please reach out to bayfieldareatrails@gmail.com and let us know that you're willing and able to provide some funding. So we thank you so much for your support.
Thank you, Genevieve. And as you pointed out, a lot of these projects are already funded, but these two in particular are places where we're looking to generate some more income. So thanks for touching on the high points there, Genevieve. So we're going to tag team it and hand this over to our Trails Subcommittee now.
Good morning, everyone. I'm John Ipson.
And I'm Chris Wegerson.
Bayfield and the surrounding communities, as you well know, are fortunate to have wonderful local trails, and many of them BATS has improved upon. In addition, several connectors and new trails have been built from scratch over the past 2 seasons, thanks to the outstanding work of volunteers, often working with our principal contractor, Will Crift, and under Kate Kitchell's great leadership. Chris and I would like to introduce to you the new Trails Subcommittee of BATS. Our mission is to maintain and improve existing trails, to build access to and extend the trails, and to identify, design, and build new trails so there will be yet more interesting options to explore. We will also address fundraising to underwrite the trails projects, as Genevieve discussed in the previous section. The Trails Subcommittee is going to have 7 members. Kate will be our member from the BATCOM. We are looking for several additional Trails Subcommittee members, but anyone who is interested in working on the Trails Subcommittee can participate in the meetings and be involved. The more the merrier. We'd welcome your participation.
So first, we're going to hold a virtual meeting in the first quarter of this year to develop a prioritized project list and calendar. We'll meet monthly during the trail season, May through November, either virtually or in person, whatever works out better at the time. In May, we're going to put on a virtual pre-season training to review maintenance, trail building techniques, and safety protocols. And you may have been involved or watched these the past 2 Mays when we've also had these. The meeting will be recorded, so if you can't view it at the time, you'll be able to view it later. In late spring, we will prepare project plans and recruit volunteers to carry out the field projects through the summer and fall months. Well, we're very excited for this season of growth for our trails. Please think about joining the Trails Subcommittee and volunteering. Bring your friends and relatives, and we're especially interested in getting young people involved. And as again, I'll reinforce what Genevieve said, if you volunteered before, we thank you and look forward to seeing you again. If you're new, we greatly look forward to having you join us. Everyone is welcome. At the end of the meeting today, please complete the online questionnaire and join the Trail Subcommittee.
Thanks, John and Chris. We're grateful for your stepping up and bringing the enthusiasm and huge experience. Actually, John and Chris have a lot of experience with trails work in other locations, so we're really blessed to have both their knowledge and their enthusiasm. I think we're going now to another subcommittee.
That's the Communications Subcommittee. Good morning, everyone. Great to see so many people interested in trails for the Bayfield area. My name is Liz Fentress, and I have the great good fortune when my husband and I moved here in 2020 to land next door to Kate Kitchell. So I feel like I won the neighbor lottery. You might imagine landing next door to Kate Kitchell. It wasn't long before you were involved in Bayfield Trails, which was great. Again, it's my good fortune. So I work with Kate. We often have what we call driveway meetings, but we're more formal now, and we've organized a communications subcommittee. And you can see what we're all about on this slide. Our mission, what we do with the communications, is we just try to share the story of the Bayfield area trails. That's our job. We just want to tell the story. So we have a fabulous website. I know Kate did a shout out earlier to Tony Jeanette. I'll just shout again to Tony Jeanette, who's facilitating kind of behind the scenes of this whole meeting, changing slides, etc. Anyway, Tony does our website. If you haven't been there, you should check it out. We do social media. Tony also does our Facebook posts. We send out emails. You maybe got one inviting you to this meeting. And then also the communications committee subcommittee has responsibility for the trail signs, all the signage that you see out and about. Just like the Trails Committee, we're looking for more help too, if you're interested. What's been fun for me being on this committee is visiting the different projects. You know, Kate will say, well, we're working over here today. Can you get some pictures? And so I get to see where people are working, meet the people who are working on the trails. You know, if you're working on a trail, maybe you're with 4 or 5 people, but because I've done a lot of documentation, I've gotten to meet a lot of the volunteers, a lot of the wonderful people who are working on this project. So, you know, join us. We are the group to join. We're looking for people who are writers. We write blog posts for the website. We're looking for people to take pictures. So far, my phone has done a lot of the work, but we'll welcome other people with great phones or better photography skills than I have. And we also are looking for people who have graphic design skills. That comes for doing maps and things like that. Again, like John and Chris said, there'll be a survey at the end of this wonderful meeting. And if you're interested, let us know on that survey. I think that's it. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Liz. I'm glad you don't feel strong-armed based on our encounters in the driveway.
No, it's my pleasure, my joy. Thank you.
Oh, that's great. So thank you, Liz. Thank you, John and Chris. Thank you, everybody. So as folks have already mentioned, there are lots of ways to participate. To sort of facilitate that, we are posting in our chat box a link to this online survey. It's a short survey, but it asks if you are interested in participating in any of our subcommittees, and or if you would be interested in participating in trails planning and coordination, or any other things that you might be interested in participating in. You know, we're open to all ideas and energy that everybody brings to our full suite of work. And whether that's pulling forget-me-nots, or it is muscling rocks, or it is taking photos like our cub reporter Liz Fentress, who's been out there eyes and ears, accompanied, of course, by Daisy. Your dog could also end up on the Bayfield Area Trails website and Facebook page. So please check out the link in the chat box for signing up to participate or to provide any kind of input you'd like. I know many of you are already on our email list. If you have not received an invitation email like for this meeting, you're probably not on our email list. So if you want to receive updates, please sign up here. And of course, you can always follow us on Facebook or on our website, as Liz has identified. So we welcome your input and ideas and participation. So what to expect looking forward, just sort of in summary. You can expect that we will, after we have folks sort of chime in with their interest in participating on subcommittee meetings, we will have follow-up virtual subcommittee meetings. Someday, we hope that we'll be able to not do just virtual. But of course, when it's whatever, 10 degrees out and the wind's blowing 30 miles an hour, virtual's cool. But then we'll also, depending on the level of interest, convene a virtual meeting about exploring new trail connections. As Genevieve mentioned, we expect to launch our fundraising campaign in the springtime as we get a little bit more feedback on the grants that we currently have in. But if you have an interest right now, you can let us know. And just like last year, our project schedule will be posted on our website. This is what it generally will look like. This sort of needs to be filled in a little bit more, but it will be organized by month and number of days. And ultimately, we will plug the dates in for these particular sessions. And when it's sort of got most of the info in it, we'll post a blog and a Facebook link. And then, as we've done the last couple of years, we will reach out to recruit volunteers on specific projects with some advance notice of when the project's going to happen, and asking folks to sign up for shifts. In some cases, we'll just have an open show up on this day. But we have found that it works pretty well in tight quarters, in particular, to have crews of 4 or 5, maybe in some cases 2 people, so that people aren't standing around, sort of wasting their time. And on the other hand, we're not all bumping into each other with Pulaskis in our hands. So you can expect volunteer recruitment, and the Trail Subcommittee, I'm very grateful, is going to pick up some of the slack there and facilitate that process. And then when the work is close to done, we look forward to holding a Trails Forum in the fall, where we can hopefully toast to the work that we've done and the growth of Bayfield area trails, and we can talk about where do we want to go next. And based on that Trails Forum, develop a new long-term plan that really lays out our path for the longer-term future. The benefit of that, of course, is it helps us align resources, but it also enables us to pursue grants and those kinds of things to support us in the long term. So that's what you can expect as we look forward. So now the floor is open. As I said at the beginning, we asked folks to hold their questions and comments and put them in the chat box for the time we are now at. And I see some folks have posted some things in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer those questions or comments now. But if we're unable to do that, we are going to record all that information in the chat and follow up as appropriate, whether that's in a blog post or a personal email. So Liz, I'm wondering if you can help me here with what's come up in the chat box.
Yep, absolutely. So I think the first question, Kate, came up when you were talking about the Hatchery to Asheville Bay Trail. And the question was, that's identified as a non-motorized trail. And you talked about skiing, but our person wanting the information wanted to know, does non-motorized include bicycles? And specifically, does it include fat bicycles?
Great question, Mark. Hi, Mark. Good to meet you. In that particular case, the Hatchery Trail, bikes would not be allowed. So the Department of Natural Resources is managing that particular area for watershed protection because of the importance of Pike's Creek Trail as a fishery. And they're also managing it for fishing access, but they basically do not allow bikes, whether they're fat bikes or mountain bikes. They do not allow bikes on that particular property. And actually, it's interesting. I can't speak as well to this as, of course, a DNR specialist can, but the DNR actually has quite a strict policy about bikes on DNR lands, and they're very limited and must be designated specifically for bikes, and or ATV use. Erica, can you by any chance speak more about that broader policy? If not, it's okay.
Yeah, more than not, it has to do with the state natural areas where it is not allowed, but it's also typically not allowed on the properties that have been purchased with DNR Knowles Nelson stewardship funds either. And I think Kate, you just hit it right on the head. It has to do with shoreline protection. It has to do with wildlife protection and minimizing disturbance to wildlife. And so those are the programs that are really key to those DNR acquisitions, and that's their first priority. And so they allow it in some areas and then don't allow it in others. And it really just depends on how the property was purchased and what their primary goal is.
Right. Yeah, so to expand on that, beyond the Hatchery to Asheville Bay connection, there are other trails, I'm sure you know, Mark, in the sort of the Bayfield area trails network and our concentrated areas. There are designated mountain bike trails and fat bike trails at Mount Asheville Bay. The Brownstone Trail is open to bike riding. There are some conversations about potentially other biking connections. For example, ultimately trying to find a way to connect Bayfield and the community of Red Cliff. That's a heavy lift for many, many reasons. So it's a very, what would I say, a nascent idea. But anyway, there's some recognition that bike opportunities are important. Biking is not allowed in the Big Ravine for similar reasons to the Hatchery Trail. It's very steep terrain, it's very sandy and erodible.
Thank you, Kate.
Yep.
And then some of this got answered in the chat, but maybe you just could quickly address it. Where's our best resource for maps for the Bayfield area trails, and are there apps? Yeah.
Yep. So I'll respond, and maybe Tony, you might have some other thoughts. So printed trail map. There is actually a existing trail map that's printed that the Chamber of Commerce hands out that Landmark Conservancy, actually originally the Bayfield Regional Conservancy developed. It's a very popular map. It's mostly for, again, walking non-motorized use. But that's a printed map. I believe that Asheville Bay has printed maps as well. Quite honestly, Bayfield Area Trails is really trying to go paperless from a ecological perspective, and from, frankly, as trails grow, printing a map, theoretically they should become obsolete. So we do focus on providing trail information online via our website. That website also links to other partners that have trail information specifically about their management area. So, and our trails also show up in other apps like All Trails, although I have noticed that some of those apps don't have the most current information. Tony, do you have anything else you want to chime in with related to that? Apps wise, we have started using QR codes as another thing, which is kind of a cool mechanism for downloading the trail. We don't actually have apps for specifically tracking yourself on the trail.
We don't have that yet. We hope to, though, in the future as the trails develop. I did put a link in the chat that goes to our trail information page. And we also have the proposed trails map. I will put a link in the chat to that as well, so you can see all of the proposed trails.
There's
Yeah.
Oh, there's a map. There's an app called Avenza, and they have it on the county site, but you can get it elsewhere, that has multiple maps like ATV maps, snowmobile trail maps, and various other maps, which can be very useful with hiking.
Thank you, Peter.
I'll second that.
Yeah.
I'll second that. Avenza is real helpful. It also locates you on the trail.
I'm going to move on here. Kate, any thoughts of something connecting Dalrymple Campground with Bayfield along the shore?
Yes, funny you should think about that, Deb. Hi, neighbor. This is an idea that has been thought about and talked about in the city of Bayfield for many, many, many years. And those who have lived here for a long time are well aware of that. It's in a couple of the city's plans. Actually, you probably know that Dalrymple Campground is a city campground, a city administered. And so this idea has sort of fallen under the umbrella of the Bayfield City Parks and Recreation Committee. Long story short, I have crashed along that slope many times to try to find a route. And people say there used to be a railroad grade through there. For the life of me, I haven't been able to find it. There may be potential to develop that connector. We haven't lost hope for that. But right along the shoreline, it's probably not feasible to make that full link from the city all the way up to Dalrymple. It would probably need to come up the hill and out to Dalrymple at that Dalrymple end up above the shoreline. However, there is actually discussion about developing a great little foot trail from what we call Washington Avenue Beach, which is right next to the ferry terminal. That's the beach kind of by a trek and trail where everybody parks. There is actually an informal foot trail that travels along the shoreline from that beach out to a rock point, which we would like to try to establish as a more appropriately constructed sustainable trail. It crosses private property. So the Parks and Rec Committee hasn't, as the City Council actually has endorsed the Parks and Rec Committee approach the landowner about securing permission for constructing that trail. So even if, so this is a case like many of our trails, maybe taking it a bite at a time. And we hope that we'll be able to establish what we're calling the shoreline trail there in the next couple of years, but that all hinges on a willing landowner. Great question though.
Yeah. Is there an opportunity to have weekly hiking groups for new residents and or people that don't like to hike alone?
Yeah, hi Betsy. I remember us talking about this when we were working on the Brownstone Trail. How do we approach this? I mean, we did talk about this at Bayfield Area Trails actually, and concluded that really the focus of our mission as Bayfield Area Trails is to create, manage, develop hiking and trail opportunities and provide information. And we're not really an organization that's going to organize hikes. However, and Tony or Liz, you might be able to chime in here. It seems feasible that those who are interested in trying to connect could do so more via connecting through Facebook, if folks are Facebook users. But we're really more oriented towards doing the trail gig, and maybe through participating as a volunteer, you'll meet other people who have an interest in hiking together.
Thanks. We've got a couple people who put in links to maps and information about where you can get maps, which is great. Some support for Betsy's idea. Then I put into the chat here, this is the link to the survey or your response to this meeting. That link is in the chat there and my little note. Here's another interesting idea. It might be helpful to ask people from the town of Bayview if there's enough interest in creating a trails club similar to that of the town of Bell. BATS could offer assistance and guidance for areas such as Houghton Falls Trail, and perhaps something in the future in Bayfield County Forest, Onion River wild area. So just interesting, is Bayview interested in organizing in the way that the town of Bell did?
I think I might just chime in and respond to that just to let, hi Kathleen, great ideas. Thank you for being here as always. We in the Bayfield Area Trails Committee have talked about reaching out to other towns, including Bayview. We did actually reach out to the town of Russell at the original foundation of Bayfield Area Trails. And at the time they said, our plate's pretty full right now, but maybe someday. But the idea of sort of sharing the CTC model is really a good one. Our conclusion about sort of how to engage other towns revolved around, is there a really specific trail project that might prompt that partnership? So I see further down your list some of these ideas about sort of the Onion River possible area. So definitely a conversation worth continuing, I think.
Yeah. And then to support here, Kate, for the trail from Bayfield to Red Cliff. And I know that, like you say, small bites, but you know, if you want to talk about that at all, we're just getting support for it.
Yeah, it really is critical to have a high comfort level with the tribal community. So our representative on the Bayfield Area Trails Committee is sort of scoping that out.
Gotcha.
So that's the cornerstone to a successful project there. But I will say that the Wisconsin Transportation Assistance Program, the TAP funds, are big dollars for these kinds of projects. You've probably seen them elsewhere in the state. And so that would be the funding source that we would pursue. And they're an 80% from the TAP program need to be matched 20%. So the next round for those grants is in 2024. So we'll see how the local conversation goes to build a comfort level with that project.
Gotcha. And then just here's a fundraising idea too for the Hatchery Road, potential funding from the state and the local chapter of Trout Unlimited, which is a good idea if we're protecting it for the fish, you know. Another fundraising idea for a fundraising event, could something like a 5K trail run walk through the Big Ravine trails be organized? It would be a great way to show off all the work done on these trails.
I can just chime in and say there are a couple people who have already expressed an interest in organizing something like that. And we did actually talk about it in conjunction with our fall event. In that Trails Forum, combining it with a fun run as well as sort of a ribbon cutting kind of celebration. So good suggestion. I'm glad to hear that other people are interested. And just, if you want to volunteer on that, hey.
And just to remind people, we are capturing the chat. So I don't want people to think, oh, we talked about your idea and now we're done. We're capturing all of these ideas and they'll go into someone's head or some thought or some plan for the future. So we're documenting all of this. Interesting, this came to me on the Driftless Trail. We call it a footpath, which allows for skis and snowshoes in addition to hiking. Just how the Driftless is, how they name it. It's called a footpath, which is interesting.
Yes. Yeah.
Here's a nice one, a lifelong dream. This is for the dream part of the timeline, to see a trail that connects the North Country Trail to Little Sand Bay. Is there any work of trail development toward making this a reality? Clearly bigger than Bayfield Trails, but wouldn't this be wonderful?
Amen. It would be wonderful. There actually are some conversations about at least a big link connecting Asheville Bay to the south. And, you know, 8 to 10 mile link there, which starts to be sort of the kinds of chunks that could ultimately build that connection. And we do routinely communicate and coordinate with Kevin Schramm, who's I think it's the Schwamigan area chapter of the North Country Trail. So we are sort of in collaboration. But it's a good one to put on the big picture, you know, sort of the big picture goal. Thanks,
Thank you, Beta. Thank you. Here's a follow up to the bicycle issue. E-bikes are growing in popularity, and that crosses a line into motorized travel. Having a plan and getting in front of user access is preferable to chasing the issue after the fact. Yeah, something to think about. Here's another link to information about the trails on our website. Oh, here's the information about the Avenza app. County has multiple maps available through the Avenza app. Here's another note about funding. There is right-of-way trail funding available for tribes through the Biden infrastructure bill. Red Cliff would have to be the sponsor for that, from what I have been told. Is that what you were talking about, Kate?
Not exactly, but this is
Okay.
good information, Chuck. Thank you.
Okay, that's from Chuck.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chuck. Here's a link to our possible trails project map. I'll read this again. Here is a link to our possible trails project map in Google Maps, also linked on our website. So that's another map resource on Google Maps. Here's a question about the Tower Hill. What's the timetable for planning of the Tower Hill property, and how does the public get involved?
So I don't know if Jen is still here. Looks like she is. Jen, I'm going to lob this question your way in terms of your thoughts from the county's perspective about how you would go about the trails planning for the Fire Tower Hill program.
Yep. I do have my daughter next to me, so apologies if we get some extra noise in here. So yeah, we haven't, we've been acquiring properties quickly in the past couple. There we go. Mommy's talking. So we're a little bit behind the ball on where we'd like to be with Fire Tower, but so we're planning. The first stage of planning is going to happen this year. What that looks like exactly, I'm not totally sure yet. I think it'll likely involve, let's see, I don't want to speak out of turn, but right now how I envision it, and this could change, would be hiring someone. It's such a large property that a couple of our foresters have been out there scoping what they think would be good ideas. But I think since it is such a large property, we're going to look for a more concrete written plan from someone like Will Crift. I will probably put that out for an RFP depending on what the cost of it. But yeah, so that would be, so that's my plan now. As far as how the public would get involved. Oh, that's a good question. We haven't really done a lot with public involvement. Cisco, it would be our, the most similar thing I can think of, where we did go to the town planning commission to kind of talk through some of those plans. I'm not sure we would do that. I guess, I don't know. So I will say the best way to get involved would maybe be write a letter to me, or write an email to me, or you could write a note to the Forestry and Parks Committee if there was some bigger ideas that you had that you wanted to see considered. So yeah, sorry, I don't have a great answer for that. This is kind of
I wonder too. Oh, go ahead, Erica.
Yeah. So also just to remind folks, this property was purchased with Wisconsin Coastal Management grant dollars and also with DNR Knowles Nelson Stewardship grant dollars. So while Landmark Conservancy does not hold a conservation easement on the property, the county is going to be very much abiding by those grant terms and putting the trails in the right locations, to minimize erosion, to achieve long-term sustainability and those types of things. And then any trail work and parking area location has to be blessed by the DNR biologist. So there are other folks involved. I guess the larger community, if you will, our larger region and trail experts will be working alongside of Jen too.
And and when we do come up with a plan, sorry, Kate, one more. When we do come up with a plan, I will be sharing it with the BATS committee. So if you are, to get other feedback. So yeah, it's not me in a vacuum, or, my department in a vacuum, kind of like Erica was saying, making these decisions, but yeah.
Yeah, I wonder too, Jen, I think that's Mark Peterson. I'm not sure, but I'm guessing it is. I wonder if this little planning effort to identify new connections could at least have a conversation about ideas there. And if, recognizing the county really is the decision maker and manager here, and that it has to be coordinated, as Erica stated. But if folks have some ideas about where, trails might be good, we could pull those through this planning committee and submit them to you, Jen, for consideration in that planning process. So,
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. And then I can, if we do hire it out, I can give those ideas to that person and they can kind of flesh out if they think it's a sustainable, good idea.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, it's a great
you know,
idea.
I would welcome that. And we've got that on the list to do some follow-up.
Yep. Sounds great.
Then Tony's put in, for upcoming projects and just project information in general. There's a link to the Bayfield Area Trails website. And I'd just like to say here, Kate, according to my computer, we have 18 new messages, but we've got about 3 minutes.
Right.
So how do you want to handle that?
Well, I think there's a whole slew of things in here about the rec center potentially
Okay.
being the focal entity for hikes.
Okay.
So I see Cindy Anderson, who's on the rec center board, sort of put that idea forward. So it seems to me that would be an ideal partnership to follow up on.
And RFR is rec center, right?
Yep.
Someone, Betsy wanted to know what is RF. That's the rec center. Okay.
Yep. And I see the feedback about potential safety concerns on the Big Ravine. Fair
Oh,
point.
yeah, there we go. Yeah, okay. Yep, okay, Asheville Bay to Valhalla. Okay, here's an idea, Asheville Bay to Valhalla, Long Lake. Oh, I made it all the way through the messages.
Yep,
I think
yep.
we're good. Okay.
Yeah, so I sort of put these in different scales, bins in terms of our short-term, long-term, but these ideas of Asheville Bay to Valhalla and to Long Lake, those all fit into this bigger vision, but we're, sort of taking a bite at a time. But it doesn't hurt to put these ideas that Beta and Kathleen and others have put forward, so that as we think bigger picture long-term, we can try to connect with the right players to advance that broader idea. And I'd want to say a big thank you for that. So I think I see a point about EMS. I think we'll make note about that. There is some EMS system in place, and Jen knows about this with the county. We have actually talked about, in some of these trails, stepping up the game to dovetail with that. If you've been out on the Asheville Bay trails, there is that EMS notification system in place out there. We haven't done that much yet because our trails are not that remote, but it's definitely something to put on the list to try to work on. And we can walk and chew gum at the same time. This is something that we can potentially chip away at, and Jen and the county have acknowledged this as an important step. So thanks, Mark, for bringing that up. So with that, I think we'll wrap it up, recognizing and respecting everybody's time. First, I want to encourage folks to respond to the online survey, which will also be posted on our website, and we'll kind of harvest that input to move forward with our various virtual meetings. And we have recorded this, so it will be posted on our website, and we intend to do sort of a follow-up email outreach to folks to say thank you and sort of summarize what the outcomes are and some of the next steps. So, we don't want to lose all of the great ideas that have come forward. With that, I just want to say a truly deep, heartfelt thank you to all of the folks who participated today and brought some really good ideas forward, to the Bayfield Area Trails Committee members who are awesome and building a wonderful partnership, to the volunteers who have pitched in from an hour here and there to dozens and dozens of hours of hard work. And to Tony for his impeccable technological and creative support. So a huge thanks to all of you for being a part of this.
Thank you, Kate.
Okay.
Erica, did you want to say something?
Yep. Just a reminder, shoreline inventory results for the Brownstone Trail. If you all want to attend on Wednesday, please go to Landmark's website. It's at the very top and you can register. We'd love to see you there.
Thank you.
And you can have a drink of wine because it'll be evening hours versus a Bloody Mary.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. we'll see you out on the trail. Stay warm and be safe.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.